We are in Module 3, which relates to Chapter 3 for Family Resource Management. In this chapter, we are going to be looking at the scientific process of family resource management, looking at some theories, and also comparing quantitative and qualitative research, and then applying each of these things to the management of resources by families. So just to note, I will skip through some of these slides a little bit quicker than others, and just make sure that you're reviewing all of the information that I've given to you in the slides on your own if I do kind of skip over the slide. So for example, a few things on this slide you'll need to go back through and kind of look at yourself. Like this video, it's talking about Ellen Swallow Richards. And so when we're thinking of family and consumer sciences, Ellen Swallow Richards is our founder of home economics, what we called it before. But she is going to be talked about probably in several of your classes. Also, Frederick Taylor is a key player in family and consumer sciences. This individual was concerned mostly with the principles of scientific management and efficiency, which is really what both of these individuals wanted, was to improve the outcomes for families and communities and make things more efficient. So if we look at home economics, the definition is really kind of centered around improving the lives of individuals and families. That still rings true even through this day. When we are talking about business management, we are still looking at production and efficiency just from a different perspective. So there are going to be a few eras of the evolution of home and business management, kind of putting these two side by side and comparing. And so you'll see in each of these kind of what each of them are focusing on. So I'll kind of skip through these as well. But this is a fun commercial from the 1950s. I actually have one of these refrigerators on the far right side of the slide. That mine does not look like that anymore. I painted it, and it's used to house some of my dog's stuff in my laundry room. So it is an old refrigerator. You'll get to see in the video some of the features in the 1950s. But this one is era 2. Then we have era 3. Really started emphasizing more for how we interact within society as families, rather than so much that work performance in the home. This right here is era 4. So we started seeing what we call the systems framework, and that's emphasizing the interconnectedness among the family, home, and everyone else. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the systems framework several other times this semester. So just make sure to pause and look at those 4 slides or 4 eras when it's talking about the evolution of home and business management. So what about the scientific process? You may have seen the scientific process or scientific method used in other courses, but this begins with the need to understand some type of behavior and helps us form those research questions. So we gather and analyze the data to answer the question, and then we provide those results in support of or contradicting a theory that may already exist by the information that we gather. So when we're talking about theories, what is theory? This is really a broad generalization that explains some type of facts or a body of facts or a phenomena. This perspectives that help explain the why or how. I'm looking at future studies, the structure, and giving researchers the guide for their inquiry. So the theories that we will look at, they are talking in the textbook about having 5 functions in the scientific process. So being descriptive, sensitizing, integrating, explaining, and value. So as we go through, I'm going to click these very quickly and just reference a few of them in more detail. The social exchange theory is the first one that we will be reviewing. The symbolic interactionism theory is the second one. This one is looking at families identify in a certain way over time as the family may create rituals and shared meaning or symbols. And so with this, that will help you understand that theory. Conspicuous consumption. When we think about social media in these days, I thought that would be really something that kind of makes you recognize what this is when we're talking about it. The next one we're looking at is the human ecological theory. So human development and family relationships, looking at this particularly with the environment that they live in. The family development theory is another one that we will review in here this semester. Family systems theory. So think about when we're looking at a family, we cannot assume that only what happens to that individual doesn't affect anyone else in the family. We can assume that when something happens to one family members, many or all of those family members are going to be affected. This grew from that general systems theory that you saw in the previous slide. So this is the family systems theory referenced in a chart. This is from your textbook. It's figure 3.1. So take a minute and see kind of some of those inputs and outputs and when we're seeing the feedback happening and where that's happening. The conflict theory is another one that you'll review, and the feminist perspective as well. There are 3 themes that are established through this theory. And then the family strengths framework, looking at what is right rather than what is going wrong with families. From this, I feel like that is a really cool perspective. That's one that we could probably have to understand some cultural context in which families live in order to maybe really understand and grasp some of that information. So now that you've seen the detailed slides about each of these theories, this table from your textbook is going to show you the strengths and weaknesses of each of these theories or perspectives side by side. So we're going to go ahead and move right into family research design. I just want you to spend more time in depth on those theories on your own. So we think about quantitative versus qualitative research. For me to remember this, we're talking about quantitative, and I always think of quantity or numbers typically. For an example, when we're looking at a quantitative design research study, it could be that it involved a researcher who wants to find out whether an increase in single-parent homes has a possible connection to an increase in juvenile delinquency. The researcher would need to have a large sample and collect enough data to show statistical significance. That's a hard word to say on this Friday afternoon. When we're looking at qualitative, for me to remember that when I think of quality. So we are looking here at descriptions, using words, not so much the numbers. So an example of a qualitative study with families would include that describing the complexities of homelessness. This study could involve a researcher conducting interviews, observation, or even both in an effort to understand those families' lived experiences. So quantity, numbers, looking for something in percentages as in the report. So quantity is quantitative. Qualitative means some type of quality. We're using words or descriptions. So this is going to give you that same example that I just shared. And so if you forget, you'll have access to that here. Qualitative, the same thing. When we're looking about the complexities or figuring out if we need to do interviews or observations, that would help us understand if it's a qualitative design. So what about research in family resource management? Studying families and individuals can sometimes create a few challenges, privacy rights being one of those. When we're talking about someone having a bias, this is going to be a systematic error that is introduced into sampling or testing by not intentionally selecting or encouraging one outcome or an answer over the others, but sometimes you do see bias. And so if you've taken a research class or will take one, you might talk a lot more in depth about bias. But that is something that is important to note for family resource management because we all have different lived experiences. So some topics that we're seeing really as a focus in research for family resource management. Right now, we think about recent recessions or potential recessions, COVID-19, our waste and inefficiency of the many limited resources that we do have. We also looked at electronic payment and banking recently in our personal finance realm. This one is always at the forefront of conversations in resource management, the lack of affordable housing and healthcare. When it comes to sex equality of household duties and earnings, we've seen that questioned in the recent years. There is actually a person from Procter & Gamble who is looking to help unveil that invisible labor that women are seeing in the household. That is something that you'll see on some of the commercials from them, where men are doing typically deemed traditionally female tasks. And so you also have to think about our households, how they're made up now. Some of these households don't have traditional gendered partners. And so with this, we're seeing the change happen in lots of ways. But all of these are some things we're focused on in family resource management research. So I know that was very quick. You're going to have to pause and go back and review some things on your own. But I want you to think and review, just to kind of get this stuff in your mind. What are two types of research methodologies used in family research? What are the strengths and the weaknesses of the family theories and perspectives that we looked at? And why do you think that cultural understanding is important to the field of family science? And how can professionals enhance their ability to serve diverse families? Because we won't always serve the families that look like ours. And it's important to understand why we want to know a little bit more about cultural norms in certain families. So think about those few things. And if you have any questions about Chapter 3, just reach out and let me know. Thank you.